Thank you for joining Dr. James Rini and I, the Curiosity Conduit, Dana Ortiz, for a look behind the curtain of Letting Destiny Deliver. Dr. Rini is a practicing psychotherapist for the last 46 years, and I am a retired law enforcement officer with 26 years experience and am now a psychology student. Please feel free to add comments or ask questions below, and make sure to subscribe and like. Dr. Rini or I will be happy to answer any questions you have. So today, we are in Chapter 2 and diving deeper into the conscious and unconscious when discussing the metaphorical comparison to the sun and moon. This conversation may lead to feelings of inspiration and curiosity, and it could also create some inner movement. That's all welcome. Life will reveal your destiny through all opportunities you keep yourself available for. So allow yourself to stay open, and let's see what destiny delivers. So, Dr. Rini, you compare the conscious and unconscious minds to the sun and moon. Can you elaborate on how this metaphor helps us understand the interplay between our conscious thoughts and the unconscious processes in daily life?
Well, as the analogy or metaphor would imply, it makes it very difficult because we can't differentiate conscious thought from unconscious thought. And in the same way that the moon doesn't put out light, it's reflected sunlight. So a lot of things that we think are really reflections of what is going on unconsciously. We just don't know that that's where their origin is or was. And therefore, don't really try to differentiate conscious from unconscious.
Okay. So you mentioned that the unconscious works without being noticed. What are some everyday examples of the unconscious influencing our decisions or behaviors without our awareness?
Okay. Let me start off with a classic fairy tale that kind of speaks to this story. And I know you're wondering what fairy tale I'm about to...
I am.
The Shoemaker and the Elves. You ever hear that one? A lot of people have not heard that one.
No.
Well, there's this shoemaker and his wife, and they have all these shoes to make. And it's late and they're exhausted and there's no way they're going to finish. So they decide to go to sleep. They wake up the next morning and all the shoes have been finished. What happened is these elves came in the night and completed the job. Okay, so that really speaks to the unconscious. You know, the unconscious is there working on stuff without us knowing that it's working on it. Like a common everyday example is when we are consciously trying to recall a name, and the harder we try, the more forgotten it becomes. So we give it up. And then what happens? It pops into our mind. Could be seconds later, minutes later, hours later. Well, without knowing it, the unconscious has searched for that name in our memory banks, and then when it finds it, it pushes it up into conscious awareness. Now, most people say, oh, I came out of nowhere. Okay. Other examples are, I remember one time being in a restaurant and, was younger then, in my 20s, and had a Coke, and, you get a straw and you like to blow the straw, on the other person. And I go, okay, let me do something different and creative. So I pulled the straw off and it was still elongated, didn't bend or anything. Go, well, let's see, I'll pretend it's a flute. So next thing I know, the music that's piped into the restaurant is flute music. And I go, oh, wow, what a coincidence. But no, what happened is my conscious mind had a question. My unconscious answered it by, oh, pretend it's a flute, because it heard the flute music. Another time I was riding in my car. It was fall and the sun was going down and starting to get a little chilly. And there was a song on at the time the heat is on was the main line. And I automatically flipped the heat on without even thinking about it. So the unconscious spoke to me in that, yeah, I need to turn the heat on. But I didn't realize the connection until I did it after. And of course, there's the famous Freudian slip where you mean to say one thing, but you say another. When we pun, we do that unconsciously. That's why people go, no pun intended, because it's the unconscious mind that did, because that's the language it speaks. It's one of the languages it speaks. So in that way, it affects our behavior all the time. Moods, people they're in a mood. It affects their behavior. Well, the mood is that they're stirring in something in the unconscious that's bothering you. And that's, people looked at anxiety and depression that way, that these are signals from my subconscious to change something or pay attention to something. And then they were able to tune into themselves and communicate with their unconscious and find out what that is that would resolve the depression or anger so much faster.
So the example that you gave when you said the heat is on the song,
Yeah.
and then you turn the heat on.
Yeah.
That's a great example of how what is around us influences us.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that innocently enough, but there's lots of things between media and social media and everything like that, what we allow ourselves to see and how that can definitely work in the background and influence us as well. Is that correct?
Correct. And people's energy influences us. Their facial expression or their tone of voice. And one of the ways that also it can affect us that we don't know is we can be affected, but our reaction to it is a distortion of what the energy was really trying to say or do. Okay? And that's why texting gets tricky, because you don't have those other cues by which to always determine what exactly the text is saying. But this is in reverse. Like, I'll give you this example. One time I had a dream and I was playing a pinball machine. And in real life, my alarm clock went off. But in the dream, I go, oh, I tilted. Because my dream interpret the alarm as the sound that a pinball machine makes if you tilt. Another time I was dreaming that I was in NASA, the Space Center, and there was a launch of a rocket. And in real life, a jackhammer was was being used. But in my dream, that jackhammer was interpreted as the rocket engine, you see. So the unconscious will interpret things based on its context, what it's thinking about. And vice versa. A lot of times what we think consciously is based on what we're thinking unconsciously, that then causes us maybe to misinterpret. Like one time, my wife and I were going to Clearwater because her mother lived over there, and it was a Friday, 5:00. And normally my wife likes to drive, but she was reading a novel and she said, hey, you mind driving? Because I, can use this time reading it. And I go, sure. So, I'm basically talking to myself, subvocally, internal dialogue. And we're about an hour and a half into the ride, and I'm starting to notice some clouds forming, and I'm looking to see if the cars the other way have their lights on or their windshield wipers on. And at that exact time, my wife goes, oh, it's cleared up. And I'm thinking, she is crazy. She is an idiot. How do we agree on anything? How does she possibly see it as clearing up when it's clouding up? Well, she was talking about the traffic. Because the traffic, 5:00 I-4, but I wasn't thinking traffic. But fortunately, right before I said all those things out loud, I realized, oh, she's talking about the traffic. Otherwise, I would have said, you're crazy. I don't see how you can think this. How do we agree with anything? So you see how the two minds can influence each other. So it is, it's a dual control system. They both control our behavior and our thoughts, but we don't control which one is controlling what at the time and how it may be influencing the other mind and misinforming it.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about, you were talking about influence. We're going to go a little bit, I think, into more navigation. So how does the ego guide the conscious mind?
The ego is aesthetically driven. So that basically means I'm good, I'm smart, I'm funny, I'm entertaining. You're stupid, you're dumb. Like parents, when a
Is
kid.
that why at times a lot of people are just like, everybody's stupid?
Well,
But
here's a better example. It's kind of like, when our child's behaving, it's my kid. When he's misbehaving, he's your kid, you see? So the ego wants to disown anything negative, only own what's negative, and push off what's negative on somebody else. It can be reversed too. Because if we have our ego may be lined up where we don't accept anything good. We only accept crap and only put ourselves down. So let me add this one point, because I've done this with clients and it kind of blows their mind. So when they're, wanting to be humble and, not talk very highly of themselves, or maybe talk very negatively of themselves, I go, that's very egotistical. Because it's the ego that's putting us down. It can inflate us and it can put us down. Either way, it's egotistical. What you want to have is true. What is an accurate sense of who I am, rather than inflating it or, disparaging who we are.
So what you were describing, these are some of the risks if the conscious mind thinks it works all alone. Is that some of the risks, or what are some?
Well, it's a risk of how the conscious mind works. Again, it's aesthetically driven. What's good is mine. What's bad is yours. What's interesting belongs to me. What's boring is, or people won't talk because they're afraid they're going to be boring. So that's what I mean. It makes choices based on that aesthetics. Am I going to look stupid? Or if I answer all the questions, are people going to think I'm, egotistical? And the ego is, according to Freud, the reality principle. It's there to check to see if it's real or not. Okay. And then one more thing that I think I've said about the conscious mind, it's also the immune system for ideas. And it will reject foreign ideas just because they're foreign, just like the body rejects foreign proteins just because they're foreign. But it may be the very ideas the mind needs in order to heal or problem solve.
Oh, that's good. In thinking about this, some of the things that I would think about when the ego thinks it works all alone is that person, it can just start going off you're describing, one way of being, I am good, I'm all these things and you're bad, but it can show in a person and make them very rigid. Somebody who's like rigid and, I don't know, seemingly narcissistic. I mean, is that correct, or?
No, that's correct. We can become the ego in its rules, then can make it very rigid. Like, a thing that, has been around for many years is that men don't cry. Okay. That's an ego. That's not a truth. It's the ego that's saying that,
Or they're told to cry in secret.
Right. Or, not to show feelings. That's a sign of weakness. No, feelings are just a sensory system. Like one time my daughter was in pre-K and my wife said, hey, they're having an open house tonight and they prefer we not bring the kids. So I thought you could stay home with the kids and I'll go to the open house. I go to her, yeah, but it's my, gym night and I don't want to miss that. I'm sure they're going to make arrangements for the kids, And my wife goes, okay, no problem. And so I leave for work, which is literally a 4-minute drive. And I'm aware all of a sudden that I'm sad. I'm thinking, why am I sad? And I thought, well, maybe I'm making the wrong choice when it comes to the open house. So when I got to work, I called my wife. I go, why don't we all go? And she goes, great idea. And my sadness went away, you see. So my ego sees feelings as a sensory mechanism. And so I dove into that feeling to figure out what was it trying to tell me. And because I figured out what it tried to tell me, it went away. It didn't, if you're calling out somebody's name, they don't hear you, you keep calling their name. Once they hear you, that you don't have to keep repeating their name.
So you're definitely a person who's, in tune with yourself and your feelings. So what's a question someone can ask themselves in any situation to help put the ego in check? Like to check themselves, spot check themselves.
The magical question. To spot check themselves.
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I do is I'll sit there and say, okay, is this action or how I'm feeling about this beneficial for me? Or is it hurting me? And just trying to look at that.
Yeah, that's kind of like what CBT is supposed to be about. Cognitive behavioral therapy is helping you think more clearly and more accurate.
I mean, I am in cognitive psychology right now,
Yeah.
too. So,
so let me go back to, you're saying the conscious mind thinks it works all alone, all by itself. So something that is very helpful, and it piggybacks on your prior question here, is, in religion, people, like in AA in particular, they say, turn it over to a higher power. Okay. And basically when they say that, what they're telling you to do is let go of the need to solve this problem consciously. Same thing with prayer. We're praying to some higher power, something beyond conscious awareness, to solve our problem. You see, and that's what the unconscious mind does. Again, it can search for that name we can't remember and push it into conscious awareness. So most of the time in therapy, I come up with my interventions and solutions unconsciously. Like I remember one time a client came in and she wanted hypnosis to stop smoking. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't imagine, this person's been smoking for 40 years. They're a chronic smoker. They have mental health issues. How in the world am I going to be able to do that? And I remember saying to myself, don't worry about it. My unconscious is going to come up with something. And you know what? It did. And that person has never smoked again. It's been 10 years.
And that speaks to me so much. I mean, I let a lot of that drive.
So I see that partner and I just delay this. It's okay. I'll turn it over there. And then the answer will come to me.
But I suppose what's difficult for that is for anybody who's listening right now who still does not have a good relationship with themselves nor trust themselves. So then I guess the question would be more so of an exercise that would help them to trust themselves. To go along with those.
No, I would do it differently, other than the word trust.
Okay.
Just knowing that you have that there. Okay? I mean, you walk without thinking about it. There's so many things. Most of the things we do well, we do without having to think about it consciously. And if you do think about it consciously, you're not going to do it as well. So just knowing and trusting that part of you will show up.
And I do, and I believe everything that I'm about to read right here. It says, you call the unconscious a mental powerhouse. And it is 100%. I know this. You know this. Some people are starting to learn this. What are some ways people can tap into this powerhouse to improve creativity or problem solving?
And by knowing that it's there. Like I had a client, it still comes in from time to time. He's a radio personality. And he was invited to this, he won an award. So he had to go to this conference and accept the award. And he was all nervous. What was he going to say? And I go, don't worry about it. It'll come to you, when you're up there. And he took that advice, and it worked. And he's done it ever since. And he was on another TV show, was another celebrity and who'd been on TV and talk shows and whatever. And She was nervous when it came her time to talk. And he goes, Dr. Rini told me to do this. And she tried it because it worked, and that's trusting your unconscious mind. You just kind of let it come. Clients will come to the office, and when they first come, they have all kinds of things they want to talk about, or need to talk about. Then at a certain point they come and go, I don't know what I'm going to talk about today. And that's when we have some of our best sessions, you see, because that's the opportunity for other things to rise up and emerge. So there's never a problem, with having stuff to process. The analogy I like to use is like when we go to sleep at night and we don't have to attend to anything, what happens then? All the stuff we didn't have time to think about, now all of a sudden we have time to think about it. But it's at the worst time because we're trying to go to sleep, you see. So the unconscious is always working, always processing. Dreams are another example because when we're dreaming, it's produced unconsciously. But if you remember that dream in the morning, it's because you were consciously aware and present. So both minds can be in the same place simultaneously. Now, most people won't remember their dreams after they wake up unless they write them down. And then, they have notes, they can go back and review it. And if they keep a journal of it, they can start connecting with it. Unfortunately, we don't tend to have those ties or connections to our unconscious. It's in one ear and out the other. So we can't see that there is continuity, that there is a flow, that there is a narrative taking place unconsciously, unless you keep tapping into it, unless you watch the show every week or every episode.
So can you share, there's it's one simple thing that you've shared with me. I've done this. I've had other people do it. It really, really works. And it's so simple. And so many times, let me back up a little bit. Us as individuals, we will get busy on our lives. So much to the point that just consciously we start to forget things or lose our place or wherever we're at, right? Because it's just a little too chaotic, too overwhelming for our mind at that time. And we'll forget something. And you taught me something to tell myself to remember. Say you're going to remember. Can you go into that? And do you know what I'm talking about with that? Like, oh, you'll remember this, or say the words that you'll remember. And you work on that with yourself. And I do remember, and I will remember.
Okay. Well, one way that I can think of answering that question is you want to be very mindful of what words you use in talking to others, but especially yourself. If you go, hey, don't forget to turn off the light before you leave, your unconscious hears the word forget. If I tell you not to think about your shoes, you're going to think about your shoes. So use the word or words that you want, with the result you want. Like I had alopecia areata, which is balding in areas. In this case, it was on my scalp. And the dermatologist gave me an ointment to put on it that would suppress the immune system so that the hair could grow. Because the hair was attacking the protein, thinking it's a foreign protein, or the immune system was. And the doctor said, if this doesn't work, then we're going to have to inject your skull with steroids, which is very painful. And of course, I didn't want that. So instead of calling it a bald spot, I called it a growing hair spot.
You verbalized the hair to...
Well, and they say they grew back. It's a growing hair spot.
Well, I can't prove otherwise. So what I can say from personal experience is talking in that way does work. And
because it evokes the unconscious.
Yes.
That's what you're doing. You're evoking it. Everything evokes the unconscious. It's always present. We just don't know it. Just like we always dream, but we don't always know it because we're not always consciously aware of while we're dreaming, And the more aware you can be of it how it plays a role in our life, then we are able to take two separate systems and combine them and make them one.
We're going to get there.
Okay.
People keep on staying tuned. We're going to get there.
I want to tell this joke, whether I should or not, but
Do it.
kind of speaking to the unconscious. Confucius say, he who goes to bed with sex problem on mind, wake up with solution in hand.
Why did I say do it?
Because you didn't know what you were getting, but
I know, I like that still.
But it's also true at a literal level, The old expression, let me sleep on it, Because if you sleep on it, your unconscious mind
Is a search and process engine. And if you give yourself the unconscious time to search and process, that's why I like to go back and things that I really enjoy learning, I reread it over and over for years to come, because I will always get more out of it. Because my unconscious has processed it, and then when I go back to it, my unconscious goes, oh, you didn't see this the first time, So it's a relationship, and it's just building that relationship, getting to know it. And I believe I told this story about Carl Jung, how people said he was wise and a sage, and he says, I don't accept that. All I did was dip my hat into the stream. He goes, but in order to dip your hat into the stream, you have to stoop a little. You got to let go of that ego inflation. That will get in the way. Because then it wants to be in charge. And by being in charge, it basically disqualifies the very competent unconscious mind. Because you got too many cooks in the kitchen then.
Well, that is all really good, and I appreciate that. Is there anything else you would like to say? No more jokes, though. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Why am I not allowed to?
Oh, fine. You can tell a joke if you have one.
I have plenty of jokes.
No, come on. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining Dr. Rini and I on this journey behind the curtain of letting destiny deliver. Join us next time as we will be discussing a very famous study in the neuroscience world and what it teaches us about how our brain works. Remember, questions or comments on our site are welcome. Did you want to say something?
I did.
Okay.
I just wanted to say something.
Well, say it.
Okay. That this obviously can be very overwhelming for the conscious ego. And what the conscious ego will tend to do is just quit, move on to something else. Okay. But what the unconscious mind is, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. It will take these individual pieces that are random, find where it fits, and then at a certain point, you have the whole puzzle finished and you can see the bigger picture. So I would encourage people to keep on learning, let the pieces accumulate. One brick does not build a wall.
No, it does not. And I do now. So remember, questions or comments are welcome below. Now ask yourself, what part of your life might destiny be trying to speak through right now? Keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, destiny isn't something you chase. It's something you allow. Until next time, be well.